So say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to Jackson with Jackson. What is this, 8? I think it's 8. Jackson, is it 8?
I do biology, not math.
Okay. Actually, I was doing some math earlier today. I'll give a little spoiler for something that's going to come out in like 2.5 months. I was looking at a spirit science video. And he's like, if everyone watches this video, or if all you guys who watch this video concentrate on it, we can raise the collective consciousness level of the entire planet. So I did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation of what % of the population of Earth has seen this video, given reasonable assumptions about like how many views to individual users there are. And then I assume 1,000, right? And he also said that the average consciousness level of the planet was only 200. And so if everyone who watched the video automatically got raised to 1,000, the maximum, it would raise the average consciousness level of the planet from 200 to 200.004. The next level up is 250. So then I figured out, like, what would it take if all those people, what level would they have to be raised to actually get to 250? And it was like over 9 billion, when the maximum is like 1,000. I was like, yeah, okay. Spirit science is off by about as many orders of magnitude as Kent Hovind usually is. That checks out. That makes sense. So look forward to spirit science content coming out from this channel, because I hate myself. Anyway, we're not here to talk about spirit science or math. We're here to talk about Jackson, Charles Jackson, Bad Jackson, Dr. Jackson, all of those. With good Jackson, Jackson Wheat, the bread man. So,
It me.
that is you. It's been a little while since we did one of these, but that's okay. They are normally scheduled for the, 4th Tuesday of the month. That is the normal schedule for these. They don't always occur, though. You know, sometimes things come up. That's okay. But let's talk about the format here. So basically, this is a React thing, but the little difference between this and most React shows is that, you know, Good Jackson and I know a little bit about what we're talking about when it comes to things like evolutionary biology and things like that, right? Like, I wouldn't say we're experts. We're definitely better at this than Dr. Jackson. By a lot.
I would agree with that analysis.
Yeah. So, what we basically do is we have some drink triggers because it's more fun that way, I guess. And because my liver needs a good workout every once in a while. You know, how can I tell if it's really doing its job if I don't cycle a whole bunch of alcohol through it once a week? So...
Can't argue with the facts.
Exactly. So we have some drink triggers. Also, the sound might be a little bit off. That's because I'm having a little bit of trouble with audio on the media player that I usually use. So I'm kind of having to hack my stream setup to make this work with a different media player. So sorry about that if that becomes a problem for everybody. Do let me know if there's something horrible. But our drink triggers kind of go like this. 1, we take a drink if the creationist in question, in this case, Dr. Charles Jackson, says something that's so stupid, we just kind of have to, right? That's probably our most common drink trigger. We'll also take a drink if he gets something factually correct without it just being a direct quotation from something. So if he just directly quotes someone and they get a fact correct, that doesn't count for anything, right? That's just someone else getting a fact. If the creationist gets it right, take a drink. That's probably our rarest drink trigger, but I do get more generous with it as time goes on because I get thirsty. We will also take a drink if the creationist tells a story that we're pretty sure didn't happen. Like, say, just keeps happening to sit next to, UC Berkeley professors who are professors of apparently goldfish feeding, because when he asks them about things like cosmology or evolution, they just get everything wrong, and then he corrects their straw man. Yeah, that's a story that probably didn't happen, so we take a drink for that. We also take a drink if a joke is told that doesn't land. Also take a drink if we make an accurate prediction. I would say we'll take a drink if I can get good Jackson here to laugh, but I would just get drunk because Jackson here laughs too much.
I mean, I think I laughed at like the drink triggers for the first like 3 or 4 episodes.
Pretty sure this is the first one where you haven't, man.
It's because I'm on mute.
Oh, okay.
There's
Well,
like a
that's cheating.
there's a dog in the
Oh,
background.
that's fair. That's
so
fair.
I'm trying to prevent your audience from doing that. So
Okay. So let's see. We will also take. There are a couple ways that you guys can trigger drinks. First, we'll go over the random or semi-random drink trigger, which is to say, if Godzilla or Mothra show up audibly, you take a drink. Now that's a phone notification from me. I have a few different phone notifications set to play those sounds, and it's just sort of a semi-random thing, just to toss in a little bit of fun. Oh, and the Venerable Beast says, this isn't really Jackson. He's not laughing. That's true. You know what? I don't actually have a video connection to the other side of this chat. It might be someone impersonating Jackson. But they're doing a good job with the voice. Whoever it is.
I mean, it can't be that hard. It just takes like a voice modulator or something, right?
Yeah, but there's a Godzilla, so we'll take our first drink for Godzilla. Okay, so, but you guys can trigger some drink triggers. One is, if you are a channel member and you super chat and you include one of the kaiju emojis, we'll take a drink for that. The other one is anyone who super chats anything to the effect that AIG are a bunch of dicks, not jerks, dicks. We'll take a drink for that because they like to copyright claim everything fraudulently because, you know, they do not consider fair use when they are making these claims. So yeah, we'll take a drink for that. And I would make those free, except I'm pretty sure you guys would try to kill me with alcohol poisoning, so no. And then the last one is we also take a drink if the creationist in question mentions, you know, like the National Socialist German Workers' Party or their leadership or various activities in, like, you know, the 30s and 40s. You know, take a drink for that. Because boy, howdy, do they like to mention that group of people. Jackson, think I missed any?
I think you're good.
Well, if I think of any while we're going, we'll just take a drink for it anyway. Also, I want to say that, guys, do be safe. You know, if you decide to play along, do so responsibly. Don't go ahead and play along with alcohol and then go operate heavy machinery or anything. And also, if you want to play along but with something other than alcohol, even if it's just water, it's perfectly fine too. Be responsible. You know your limits. And if you don't play along. Robert Madewell, who's been a member at the annual level for 14 months, sent in a Godzilla emoji, so we'll drink for that too.
Nice.
All right, if you guys want access to all those emojis, there is a join button below this channel. It starts at $1.99 a month. Here we go.
In the desert to discover dinosaur fossils. He loves kids.
You were talking about some biologist that Charles Jackson doesn't like. I don't know why.
College kids,
Serena.
and so do I.
Yeah.
Some of the other
Sounds really
philosophical
quiet.
things he's written, I just think he's a great guy.
It probably will. This is the maximum. You might have to turn it up on your end with the stream volume slider.
I mean, I hear you just.
Oh, look at that. We got another drink trigger. Yeah, unfortunately, this is part of the problem with using another media player. This is the maximum volume I can get out of this guy.
That's fine.
Sorry.
But
Sorry.
we're enemies in this debate. I have great respect. Oh,
Okay, one thing for me that is always weird about this is, like, we are enemy. Like, dude, my guess is this guy doesn't think about you at all. You're just a weird pseudoscientist. No one is really no scientist is your actual enemy there, Dr. Charles Jackson, because none of them care. Because you are the intellectual equivalent of a flat earther in terms of biology and Earth history. There's no reason for them to consider you an enemy. You might think of him as your rival. That might be, but that's an entirely one-sided opinion. I can very well assure you.
pray, because I may get a chance to debate Lawrence Krauss.
I'm pretty sure that didn't happen, and this is from 2016. So, unless anyone has found the Charles Jackson Lawrence Krauss debate that I'm unaware of, then I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. So, feel free not to pray for it, because I'm pretty sure that ship has already sailed. Or, you know what? I'm not telling you what to do. You can pray for it if you want to. Have fun. Knock yourself out. I don't care.
That would be really cool. I don't really respect him.
It's very strange that he says, on the one hand, it would be really cool to debate Lawrence Krauss. I don't respect him.
Yeah.
Okay, my dude.
You know what? I'll bet the feeling is mutual.
All right.
I mean, he's incredibly intelligent, but I got God, or God's got me. That's the way it's got to be. There was another one that I
Oh, God's on your side. Good to know, because, it's not like both sides in nearly every war ever have thought that. Guess what? At least half of them were wrong. Probably more than that.
would like to debate who I do. Oh yeah, someone was asking me about would I debate Neil deGrasse Tyson. I have a huge amount of respect for that man. He's wrong, of course.
Okay, hold on. I want to know why you have respect for Neil deGrasse Tyson, but not Lawrence Krauss. Now look, this was in 2016. There have been some questionable things coming out about Lawrence Krauss since then. So in 2022, I can understand why you would have that difference of opinion. But in 2016, had any of that stuff come out, Jackson?
I do not know the actual timeline of events.
Okay.
No idea.
I don't
But
think
also,
so.
I don't think Neil deGrasse Tyson does debate with creationists. I don't think I've ever seen him in a debate with a creationist.
I don't know that I've ever seen him in a debate with anyone.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he just does like lectures and stuff.
Okay.
So I feel like Charles Jackson here is just like, I'm gonna reach out to like every famous science communicator ever and try to get them to debate me. And as you said, they're all like, I've never heard of you. I don't know who you are.
Right?
Why are you bothering me?
Yeah, I don't know.
So
But he's a very gifted teacher. He's a very personable person. He's kind to people. I mean, he's a good guy, and he's shrewd and clever, and I respect that in an enemy. I mean, he really got all over Richard Dawkins' case for not being personable, and they put him in sensitivity training, and Dawkins had to go on a lecture tour with Neil deGrasse Tyson to learn how to be nice to people.
I feel like that's not how that series of events transpired
I'm
at
gonna take
all.
a drink for things that didn't happen. There was, as far as I remember, a joint lecture circuit, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't because someone put Dawkins in sensitivity training. For one thing, who would have the authority to do that?
Right. Or like Dawkins isn't employed by anyone. He hasn't been employed by Oxford since like the late 90s or early 2000s. So who would have the authority to do that?
Right. He's basically self-employed. Now, maybe his publicist would have said, like, hey, Richard, you gotta cool it. Like, maybe. But, like, yeah, I don't think he was put through sensitivity training. We got a couple of super chats. Thank you very much. Oshkosh Bagosh for $9.99 US says, have you seen Prehistoric Planet? Yes. I got sucked into the first episode today. I heard it's one of the more accurate CGI depictions of dinosaur. AIG sucks D. We're going to take a drink for that. That's close enough. Okay, so my quick thoughts on Prehistoric Planet, because I don't actually think I've given them since I saw the show. There's a lot of stuff that actually Jackson and I had this discussion briefly before we went on air, where I'm going to say, well, I can't say that's definitely wrong, but there's no evidence for it. Like the ceratopsians going through the cave to get it like a salt lick or something. We don't know that that's the case. It's based on elephants who perform the same behavior in parts of Africa. So it's a reasonable thing for such animals to do because, ceratopsians were roughly the size of elephants. And, animals need salt, right? Like it's part of like your neurology. If you don't have salt,
right,
your nervous system shuts down. So it's a reasonable idea. The same thing is true with like the air sacs on the is it Titanosaurus?
Oh, yeah, that was Dreadnoughtus.
Dreadnoughtus, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was cool, but like, eh?
Yeah, it's in sort of the same vein as like the neck frill on Dilophosaurus in Jurassic Park. I can't say it didn't have a neck frill, but there's no reason to think it did.
The thing about it that I was kind of thinking of after I finished the show was like all of those instances, like none of them are not present in any other like tetrapods, right? Everything they did was like modeled after some other tetrapod, like whether it was cuckoos or parrots or elephants or frigate birds. It's like they modeled it after something alive. But yeah, we can't. Do we know for a fact they did that? No.
Actually, famously, the sneaky male bit where you had the so-called femboy pterosaur. That's actually a behavior and a morphological strategy where you have two different male morphotypes that you can see in the giant cuttlefish of Australia. So most males are very much larger than females, and they dominate certain territories, and they will be aggressively competitive with males who encroach in their territory, and then they will have breeding rights with the females who end up in that said territory. But there's another morph for males that is about the same size and shape as the females, who will then opportunistically mate with with females, while the main big beefy male is essentially not paying attention.
So birds that do that too.
Yeah, so that's actually a real strategy. So basically, what I can say about it is everything in there is at least plausible in the sense that something else does that thing today. Does that mean that all of those things were done by those animals? No. Do we have any evidence of sneaky males in Pteranodon and its relatives, like monophenestrans and things like that? No, we don't. No evidence of it at all. Is it a reasonable idea? Yes, it is. So that's my take there.
Yeah, it's not just cuttlefish. Like the beetles that I happen to study also have males, which are the horn size in the adult males is determined by how much nutrition they got as juveniles, and so they can have the huge horn, or they might have a much smaller horn.
Right. As far as the actual physical depictions, like physical proportions and whatnot, the only real complaint I have is that, as far as I know, all modern archosaur eyes don't actually move in their sockets. Archosaurs have to move their heads to move their eyes. That's why birds do that head bob thing, where they hold their head still for the most part, and they dart it forward when they're like walking on the ground. Whereas, as far as I can tell, all of the archosaurs in the show had movable eyes. Now, can we say for certain that that wasn't the case? Like, no dinosaurs had movable eyes? No, we can't say that. However, my understanding is that if you do like the phylogenetic bracketing, the more parsimonious conclusion is that dinosaurs probably couldn't move their eyes in their sockets, and therefore they would have had to move their heads sort of like birds. Whereas, like I said, I think every single one, or at least we got a close-up of the eyes could move, which is a little iffy there. Other than that, though, I didn't really have any complaints about the... Yeah?
We all know what you were really looking for. The dinosaur feet.
Actually,
that was your
that's
main...
true. That they did... So it's actually mostly ceratopsian and sauropod that are my main issues, because all the other feet are pretty easy to get right, and most people do, because they basically just look like big bird feet. But the sauropod feet were good, as were the ceratopsian feet. So, did a good job on that. There you go. That is a way too long of an explanation for Prehistoric Planet on a stream. Not about that. But thank you again, Oshkosh. Gupdu3 for $2 says Neil also had questionable stuff come out about him. Oh yeah, I think I do remember something about that. Yeah, that's
vaguely. Yeah, I vaguely remember.
I think there was
hearing about that.
Some accusations about some kind of untoward behavior.
Yeah, like that was a couple years ago, I think, or a few years ago. I don't quite remember.
Well, I don't want to keep dwelling on that. Neither of those people are in this stream, nor is a stream about them.
You can say, because you mentioned Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins may not have any harassment allegations, but he's being horrendously transphobic. So there's that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stop thinking about weird, horrible things that science communicators do. And I'm going to just go ahead and say, as someone who's attempting to be a science communicator, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Because Tyson ranked all over Dawkins at the Beyond Belief
Charles
Atheist
Dawkins.
Conference in Austin, Texas about...
Remember, this is supposed to be about bacteria are not evolving resistance to antibiotics. I just want to point that out, because this is actually something I was talking to Bent and Bob Knob about. Like, creationists will go on these wild tangents. It's like, you're here to talk about a topic, man. Why are you talking about how much you like or Richard Dawkins or Neil deGrasse Tyson or for that matter, Charles Darwin? Who cares? Anyway.
And he has a slideshow behind him. So it's like, it shouldn't be hard for him to keep on task.
Right?
Because Dapper and I, as you know from both of our channels, we went through a couple slideshows and we pretty largely kept on task. Now, did we go on tangents here or there? Sure. But like, most of this video has been tangents.
Yeah. I don't get it. Maybe it's a creationist thing. Like, maybe creationist audience expect like audiences expect tangent. I was about to say like maybe that's something they get in like their sermons, but then I'm thinking back to like sermons that I've heard, and they usually weren't this tangential. So I don't know.
I don't know.
3 years ago, and I saw the YouTube video of that. He really let him have it. He said, "You're a very witty and clever person, but you are making us all look bad. You're mean-spirited." This is Tyson talking to Dawkins. You
So
have
can I
got
say
to stop
something
that.
about this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so from everything I have heard and read about Dawkins, weird transphobia aside, is actually he's like an extremely polite person. Like maybe in this one instance he was mean to somebody, and I'm not defending him by any means, but I'm just saying from all the stuff that I have read about people's interactions with him, is he's apparently extremely, extremely polite. So I don't know.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise
Maybe he was
me.
mean. Yeah, I don't know.
You're making us
Anyway.
all look bad. I actually have a picture of that panel discussion up on the wall in my science lab right now. You know, I always tell students that story. So anyway,
Oh, they
I
also
wish Dawkins
have
would-
to suffer through a stupid story that probably didn't happen.
Yeah.
get saved. You know, he's not really, of all the evolutionists, he's not very smart. He's not shrewd.
Ooh.
He's not.
Oh, he's not very
Who are you-
smart, huh?
Is he saying Richard Dawkins isn't that smart?
This coming from the man who doesn't understand that pre-existing mutations is part of the theory of evolution when it comes to natural selection and mutation. Oh, take a drink for Godzilla.
One of the most prolific science writers of the last like 50 years, who basically was the voice behind the selfish gene concept and invented the meme concept, and also wrote extensively on evolutionary arms races and brood parasitism.
Just a big dummy.
Not that smart.
Nope.
He's dumb. He's
Look,
big.
I have problems with Richard Dawkins, but I'm not going to call
Oh,
him a big dummy.
absolutely.
Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I am not an uncritical supporter of Dawkins by any means, but like,
Right.
he's not an idiot. That's not something you can say about him. It's sort of like
Absolutely.
Sir Richard Owen. Everyone agrees, guy was a dick. However, he wasn't an idiot.
Not clever.
Right, exactly.
He's not very knowledgeable either. He's not bright at all.
We're just gonna take a drink for just how much projection is happening right now.
What? What?
We're just taking a drink for Charles Jackson projecting so much about an irrelevant topic in the middle of his talk about how bacterial resistance to antibiotics is an evolution. This is amazing.
He's talking about a guy who taught zoology at Oxford for decades.
Mhm.
He's not that smart.
No.
Okay.
Big dummy.
I can't respect him intellectually, but they've slapped him up there because he's rude, and they need someone who's rude.
He's a big meanie
No.
head and a dummy. He's poo-poo.
It's okay, hold on. If they're just tossing Richard Dawkins out there because they need a mean guy, then why do they also apparently send him to sensitivity training? Like, pick a lane, man. Either all of the evil evolutionists need a big meanie poo-poo head to be mean to the poor creationists, or Richard Dawkins is too mean and he needs sensitivity training and all the evolutionists sent him to it. Like, you can't have it both ways, man. My goodness, this is...
Oh, man.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I got off the subject again.
Oh,
Let's
you don't say.
Continue. There you go.
Here
This
it is.
is just horizontal variation. No new information. It's just changes in the numbers.
But where did the initial variation come from there, Chuck? Call him Chuck now for no reason. I don't have a good reason. Actually, I did title one of these Chuck, and I put Charles Jackson's face on top of the body of Chuck from the TV show Chuck. That was a thumbnail I did.
Nice.
Yeah, but so Chucky, where did all these variations come from? Oh, was it mutations? Is that what it is? So here's the thing, right? There's a famous experiment from like 80 years ago, right, about bacterial resistance and whether or not these mutations are pre-existing and whether they can occur de novo in populations and things like this, right? It's called the Luria-Delbruck experiment. Or is it Delbruck-Luria? It doesn't matter. Those are the last
It
names
doesn't
of the
really matter.
experimenters. If you search it either way, it'll come up. Even if you misspell it, it'll come up. I know, because I did misspell it when I searched it the first time. So basically, what Delbrick and Luria did was, and I'm reminding you, this is about 80 years ago. So this is before we really knew how genetics worked, but we had Mendelian inheritance pretty well down, right? We knew that there were things called genes. They affected inheritance. They were granular, and that there could be changes in them. New traits could arise. We knew all of this. So there's a question. Okay, well, do mutations arise randomly in a population? Do they arise constantly? Are they caused by environmental pressures? Like, if you introduce antibiotics, will that cause bacteria to mutate to become resistant? So what they did was they took many, many colonies. I believe it was Escherichia coli, E. coli bacteria. Is that right, Jackson?
I think you're right.
Okay. I mean, it's one of the more popular model organisms for bacteria, right? So it's probably... like, you can usually just default to it being E. coli in most experiments. Anyway, so they take, like, hundreds of these colonies, right? And they say, okay, if the presence of antibacterial agents, antibiotics, is going to cause mutations, then every colony that we take samples from should develop resistance to a given antibiotic in a small range, right? They should all the descendants of all these colonies should get roughly the same amount of antibacterial or antibiotic resistance because they're getting it in response. Now, if it's not the case that these are mutating in response to antibiotic, then we should get a wide range of response in the descendants of the colony because some of them will already have pre-existing mutations. However, there's a follow-on to that, which is if the mutations pre-exist, but can also arise de novo randomly in populations during the exposure, we will get some descendants of cultures that have very low levels of resistance because they didn't have any significant amount of resistance in the first place in terms of their genetic variability. But some of them will mutate it, and then descendants of that subpopulation will show strong resistance to the antibiotic. Well, Jackson, you want to guess which result happened?
Is it the first one?
The one where we have a very small range because they mutated in response? No, it was not that one.
I'm sorry, I missed. It was the where they turned out that the mutations can arise. They don't arise in response to the pressure. They arise and then are selected by the pressure.
Yep.
Sorry.
So the result confirmed very conclusively, again, about 80 years ago, one, that mutations arise independent of environmental factors by and large, and that two, they can occur both before and after selection pressure begins. Yeah. So
Boom.
we've known for, at the time that this was given, probably closer to like 75 years, that this whole argument is already moved.
Of the ones
Well,
who already have the trait.
I mean, in the show I've been doing on my channel is I've been reading a creationist book from 1967, and wouldn't you know, all the exact same arguments that Charles Jackson uses were in that book, or are in that
Shocker.
book. 1967, like, whoa.
Absolutely no
Crazy.
surprise.
Horizontal variation. It's natural selection from existing genes.
Yes, that's how evolution works with selection there, Chuck.
Also, it's true about the moths. The Bistonbecularia.
Oh, Lord.
You know what? He is right.
Hey.
It is also true about the moth. That was a pre-existing
Okay.
variation. Take a drink.
So, can I explain the bit behind this?
Yes, please do.
'Cause I'm looking. Doesn't say anything about it here. Oh, maybe he'll mention Hardy Weinberg. Interesting. So the peppered moth experiment, whatever you want to call it, was an observation, a natural experiment, if you will, that occurred, or that the observations were made in the early 1900s. So basically, what happened was you had the industrialization of Britain, and you had factories which were pumping out, smoke and ash and soot and all that good stuff, and it was covering the local flora. And so there was a mutation. Gasp. We've figured out which the exact mutation was, which caused the pigment change in Biston betullaria, the peppered moth. It was actually a transposon, which so it's a segment a genetic sequence which changes its location in the genome. It moved into the pigment gene, and this caused like overexpression of the pigment or whatever. And now instead of it being white with black spots, it's like black with white spots. So they even figured out like that mutation occurred in like 1820. So it's like right around 1820. They know exactly which mutation it was, and of course we have the selection pressure. And we know it was birds selecting the moths that couldn't hide because oh gosh, what was his name? Kettlewell did the experiment first, but there were some holes in his methodology. He died, I think, like in 2012. Who was a population geneticist? He actually redid this whole experiment and shored up the holes in the methodology.
Yep,
and got the same result.
Yeah, same result. Yep. All right. So, one thing I want to point out, fun little legal and economic history thing. Around the same time, yeah, I got a little bit of buffering, but I'm not sure why, because I'm looking at my output rate, and it's steady in like the 2600 kbps, which is usually where it's supposed to be. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to look into why, see if other people are having trouble with buffering, even though their upload speed is great. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, so a fun little tidbit about the economic and legal history. This is around the same time also that like the end of the 19th, early 20th century, that the nuisance tort policies in Great Britain were modified to prevent people from successfully bringing nuisance lawsuits against factories as landowners who had had pollution dumped on their land. So, yeah. Because that was actually limiting the factory's ability to put out pollution because people were being able to successfully sue them for nuisance torts. That's what a nuisance tort is for, right? Someone does something that, while they're not directly trespassing on your land, greatly devalues it, so you bring a nuisance tort. Nope. Not anymore. Fun stuff there. Yeah. Because it's more important to have lots of factories than it is to have clean water and air and housing. Who cares? You gotta make as much, I don't know, steel or whatever they were making at the time. Awesome.
Cash money.
Yeah.
Peppered moth story in Kettlewell's work in England. It's also true about insects.
Oh, by the way, guys, because of the slight technical difficulties, I don't have my 3D transform set up for this. So sorry about cutting off a whole bunch of the text. I don't. It was down to the wire, so I just. Sorry.
Resistance. Francisco Ayala, you might have heard of him, Scientific American, said in 1978, insect resistance to a pesticide was first reported in 1947 for the housefly, Musca domestica, with respect to DDT. Since then, resistance to one or more pesticides has been reported in at least 225 species of insects and other jointed leg things, arthropods.
Hooray! We're going to take a drink for Dr. Charles Jackson knowing what the translation of arthropod is. It means jointed leg. Or jointed foot, but whatever.
This is the same argument.
Yes.
It's one argument.
Mm-hmm. This is one and only argument.
If
genetic variants exist to be selected from, therefore not evolution.
The genetic variants,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, these individuals who have this particular variety of that trait, the variants that are required for resistance by the most diverse kinds of pesticides were apparently present in every one of the populations already. They were apparently.
What does that mean, Bad Jackson? Does that mean God created the population with every single variation in it already?
Well, that's what it must mean, but he has problems with things like blood bottlenecks and whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, the 2 mosquitoes that were on the ark had all of the variations.
Yep. Now, here's something, right? A lot of creationists will say, oh, well, you didn't need to have insects on the ark But I will remind you that in the Bible, it says that all flesh, including creeping things on the face of the earth, was destroyed. And elsewhere in the Bible, when it tells you what creeping things are, it spells out things like locusts and worms and things like that. So we're talking about terrestrial invertebrates is the primary makeup of creeping things. And the Bible is extremely clear that creeping things were among the things killed in the flood. So sorry, guys. The Bible is explicitly clear that you had to take insects on the ark or they would have died. No real way around that. Of course, you could interpret the Bible less than literally, but then why are we having this conversation in the first place?
No, Dapper, that's impossible. Get out of here.
I just like how the Earth creation is like, oh, we're taking the Bible very literally. It's like, yeah, so what about the creeping things that had to be on the ark, or say the floodgates of heaven? You know, those holes in the solid dome of the firmament that separates the waters above the earth from the earth that God opened up to let the water rain in from? What about those? How does NASA work if there's a solid dome over a flat earth? Yeah. The actual biblical literalists are in fact the biblical flat earthers. I mean, honestly, if you're consistent with like AIG's hermeneutic, you should be a flat earther.
Jesus is also a door, like an actual door.
Yes, he's made of wood and he's got a little handle on him. It doesn't make you wonder how you crucify a literal door, since they don't like have lungs or anything. But hey, you know what? I wasn't there.
Currently present in every one of the populations exposed to these man-made compounds like DDT. In 1978, we knew. But didn't that textbook say we should understand evolution? It's important to understand evolution because if we don't understand evolution, we won't understand the evolving of resistance to antibiotics in bacteria.
They're right.
Yeah, that's true. And I want to remind everyone, this is the man who's decided that, despite not having any medical degrees, that he knows that the proper treatment for all bacterial infections is broad-spectrum antibiotics. Yep, that's the best move for all bacterial infections, broad-spectrum antibiotics, because resistance to antibiotics isn't a real thing that evolves, so who cares about it? Broad-spectrum everything. Also, forget the fact that that's really, really bad for the beneficial bacteria that are in your body. Also not important. I mean, sure, you might have chronic diarrhea for months to come, but that's a small price to pay for breeding superbugs inside your own body.
I told nurses I happen to know about this, and they were aghast.
Yeah, it's... Any medical professional should be. Pro tip, if you need medical advice, seek out help from a medical professional. Do not ask Dr. Charles Jackson what to do.
Resistance to pesticides in insects.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Just take a drink.
Oh,
You don't get to describe evolution and then say evolution isn't important.
so the thing is, some of these, I think it's organophosphates, target neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, if I'm remembering correctly. So basically, what some arthropods do is they'll like increase their acetylcholine production in the face of of these pesticides to counteract it. So, I mean, I guess Charles Jackson would probably say, that's not new. You're just changing the regulation of something that already existed. Like, I guess.
Look, every single change, they can just come back at it as, well, that wasn't, the de novo creation of an entire regulatory network out of thin air. It's like, yeah, that's true. Sure wasn't. That seems to be his standard, is like, evolution requires whole cloth, new entire biochemical pathways and regulatory networks to simply appear as single mutations somewhere in a lineage.
That is also why creationists never talk about the ice fish antifreeze proteins, which evolved from a gene that makes a protein which breaks down the amino acid trypsin.
Look,
so they won't talk about the fact that this
that's
like
not
a snippet of it.
That's just a modified trypsin. Trypsin?
Trypsinogen.
Trypsinogen, there you go.
Trypsinogen.
That's just a modified
But
trypsinogen gene. It's not a new gene at all.
You think if that was their like go-to, they would at least talk about it, but they do not.
No, they do not.
Yeah, geez, like we're not touching that one.
Mm-mm.
And I think
Ice fish are banished from the Creation Museum.
yeah, the only one that like Dr. Purdom mentioned was this other group, which just kind of basically had a sort of antifreeze, and they just sort of amplified it a bunch of times. Which I mean, that works too. That's perfectly fine. But like, there's a reason she picked that one and not the notothenoid genes.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit with the narrative as well.
No, it does not. All right, here we go.
It's not true. It doesn't take a genius to see this. I have a gift from God of teaching.
You're gonna take a drink for that. That's stupid enough to take a drink. My goodness. Jackson, Bad Jackson, Chuck, if you... Lying to your audience is not a gift for teaching. Just gonna put that out there. That's not what a gift of teaching is. Or if it is, then, I mean, maybe God has some rather unsavory characteristics that you might not like having publicly aired.
So what I am doing is I'm showing you...
It would make way more sense if God were like a trickster, right? Like, so many more things about biology would make sense, like, for intelligent design, like, if God's just screwing with us.
Yeah. But, like, God was actually Loki all along, and he's since killed off the rest of, like, the Vanir and whatnot. Like, now that's just him. It's just me, Loki. Hi, guys. I wrote the Bible. I mean, it's kind of the conclusion you have to come to if you're going to take the literalist interpretation seriously. There aren't a whole lot of other options. Sort of why, for almost all of Christian history, the literal interpretation of various parts of the Bible are usually been seen as, like, the least important part of that part of the Bible. Like, yeah, it's weird. There's been multiple ways to interpret Bible passages, including, like, typological and metaphorical.
Crazy.
Things like this. And while literal has always been in there, like, what is the literal meaning of the text, it's generally been the one that's been given the least attention in historical Christian theology. Which actually is something that Christian theology has a lot in common with in Jewish theology, which also has multiple ways to interpret text. One of which is a literal reading, but it's also one of the ones that gets less attention because it's more important to learn about things like, the ethical lesson, whatever that you're supposed to be learning about. Look, I'm not a theologian. Go find one if you really, really want to dig into that.
This stuff, and I'm not tricking you. I'm not just lining up all the cherries and making it look good. Like that little line of frogs. What happened to the frogs? Where do frogs go? Little line of frogs, they all look natural. They're,
Earlier in the video, there was a little lineup of stuffed frogs on a pew. I don't know why, but they were in front of a row of children. That's just a thing.
Anyway, this is the true stuff. This is real stuff. And by the way...
Yes, all of that stuff is true. Take a drink. You are right. The facts are, in fact, that mutations happen independent of selection pressures. And generally speaking, segments of the population are pre-adapted to new selection pressures, and those are the ones who tend to go on to produce the majority of the next generation when new selection pressures are introduced. Yes, this is true. By the way, Liz D says, lining up cherries, is that a thing? He's basically just trying to extend the cherry-picking metaphor, like he's not cherry-picking. Which, I mean, in this case is actually kind of true. Like, it is the case that evolution does not proceed by, like, directed mutation. No one ever said it did. Well, except, oddly enough, for some creationists who do, in fact, say that.
Lining up cherries is how I would, like, synonymize cherry picking if I had a word count for an essay.
There you go, yeah. So, it's ironic, because basically, Charles Jackson here is arguing that because what ICR, Institute for Creation Research, calls continuous environmental tracking, which is mutations in response to environmental pressures, doesn't happen. Therefore, evolution is false. And meanwhile, ICR is arguing that because it does happen, therefore evolution is false. So it's fun to see a damned if you do, damned if you don't from various creationist organizations, which, by the way, disagree with each other strongly. Like, Charles Jackson here is representing AIG, and they're all on board for natural selection. Whereas ICR is super against it. They're like, that's letting the no metaphorical nose of the camel in terms of evolution. Can't let that in the tent. Just come all the way in. And there's AIG like, nah, bro, continuous environmental tracking just totally doesn't happen. We already know this. It's like, yeah, we do. So this is just Charles Jackson pretending that basically the negative result from the Luria-Delbruck experiment is what evolution says is the truth. When in fact, no, that has not been a viable hypothesis for, like I said, like 80 years. I'm pretty sure no one in this chat is old enough to remember when the Luria-Delbruck experiment was conducted.
Okay, Wes, let's leave this presentation on the desktop so anybody can get it and get these citations and these quotes.
Wait, what are they? Does he just mean like leave it up as the active slide, or does he expect people to like come by with their own like USB drives and like download the presentation because it's still on the desktop?
It's entirely possible his knowledge of technology is as comprehensive as his knowledge of antibiotics.
That would be, yeah, okay, yeah, that might be. Because the words he said indicate that he's expecting people to download it like onto their external device from the desktop. But I think in context, what he actually needs is just leave it up on screen for people to jot it down. But whatever, it's a minor thing.
Well, I'm not finished with my presentation yet.
You could have been if you hadn't gone on so many damn digressions, but okay.
So, okay, they told me I could go till midnight, right? Okay, and Ed here tells me that the Perkins is 24 hours, so we'll go eat something after that. Okay, here we go.
Oh, that was a joke that didn't take.
And this, how many have ever seen this before? Yep, I could do a whole presentation on this. Man,
no,
the stories, the things.
No. Of what happened with the finches. So I think there are 13 total species of Geospizinae, the Darwin finches, which aren't finches or tanagers. But no, this is not an example of like hybridization, repeated hybridization between a bunch of different populations. This is a single population which did not have all of these ecologies, which then landed on one of the islands of the Galapagos, and then subsequently radiated into a variety of niches.
Like you might call it an adaptive radiation?
Almost. It's almost like we discussed this in our PowerPoint.
Maybe you guys should check out the videos that Jackson Wheat and I did about Evolution 101.
Yeah, because this... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they can be found on this channel and Jackson's channel.
Yeah. This is bonkers. Horizontal variation? What does that mean in this context? Like, these finches there are mutations in each of these species that are not shared by the other species.
Yeah, we know that this was not a population of finches, well, tanagers, that had the genetics for all of these different beak shapes and colors. That wasn't what happened.
No. Good lord, no.
In fact, don't we know that it was a very small founding population?
It was, yeah. We so we know what the closest relatives of the Galapagos tanagers are, and there are South American tanagers, which I know is a huge surprise. Right. Tanagers in Ecuador are closely related to this archipelago, which is the closest to Ecuador. So like, big shock. Who knew? Who could have possibly seen this coming? We're all trying to figure out who did this. Yeah, no, this is just crazy. Natural selection from existing genes. Like, yeah, there was natural selection acting on existing genes.
But there were also subsequent mutations.
There's a really good book by Jonathan Weiner. It's The Beak of the Finch. Came out originally in 1994. I highly recommend the read. One of the things he talks about is these finches, the finch beaks, basically fall in certain points along the like adaptive landscape. Because when you have the wet season, you can have hybridization between different species. But as soon as the dry season comes around, their beaks have to be in very specific parameters. Otherwise, they can't eat food fast enough, basically. they expend too much energy trying to eat seeds or berries or piercing cacti or whatever, or piercing other birds, because there is actually a vampire finch.
Fun.
Yeah, Geospiza septentrionalis. Um, but when the dry season comes, natural selection is very, very powerful, and it sculpts all the populations for a very specific range of beak sizes, like on the order of a couple millimeters or something like that.
Yeah.
And so Grant's Peter and Rosemary were the ones to first document this back in like the 70s or 80s, something like that. But yeah. Oh, this is wrong. It's totally wrong.
All right, I want to say Carrie Bronson, who's been a member for 15 months at the level of Amnio. Thank you very much, Carrie Bronson. Says, I think Bad Jackson should watch your Evolution 101 videos. He might actually get something out of it. Yeah, probably. Probably. Also, I want to point out that I just noticed Benthoven has the 24-month plus membership badge, which is literally just me. So congratulations. That is, I think that makes you the first person to actually get to that point. Thank you very much, Benthoven. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to get fancy badges after your name, there is a join button.
This is also just natural selection, whether it's a drought year or it's a rainy set of 7 years. It's just horizontal variation.
Yes and no. It is natural selection, but you can't say that no new genes have popped up because more genes exist in these populations than existed in the original founding population.
Once the drought conditions are over, the numbers of birds with short and long beaks returns to a different equilibrium. That's all.
I mean, that's natural selection. That's like one half of the natural selection and mutation. Pointing out that one half of that pair works doesn't cause a problem for the pair as a whole.
Right. Like, yes, there are fluctuations from year to year, but these ranges were not present originally. This range in beak sizes and colors were not in the original population. They have
mutation
resulted. Right, exactly.
Ones that in some cases we can even track. It's like, oh, this mutation happened in this, ancestral tick species of this type of tanager, and here's the place where it happened, and it resulted in this morphology, and there you go. And in some cases, we can even track when it would have happened.
Yeah, because the grants, believe it or not, the grants actually go around, I think it's on Daphne Major, and they will tag every single bird on the island.
That is ridiculous.
It is. They have lots of like grad students who come with them and do that sort of stuff. But yes, they'll go and they'll tag every single bird on the island. That's also part of the beak of the finch, as he spends a long time talking about that. So yes, you're right. It's Daphne Major is, for all intents and purposes, like a petri dish. It's like a very large petri dish. You can track which individual had a particular mutation, when they had that mutation, who their offspring are, because they have all of that.
Mm-hmm.
They have all of it in a database.
In real time, tracking it.
Yes.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. All right, here we go.
It is.
Little baby birds are being born every year with big beaks and little beaks. It's
sometimes due to mutation there, Charles.
It's just the big beak ones survive better in the drought times than the little beak ones do, because they can crack
only
open
for certain species, though. Only if their species has large beaks overall. Like, if they... That's the whole point, though. It's like, during the wet season, they're fine if they have a slightly smaller beak. And if they can't do their ecological function extremely efficiently during the dry season, they die.
Yep.
That's it. Seeds from last year and eat them. And this is not a good seed cracking beak. It's great for catching bugs flying through the air, and when there aren't mud puddles for bugs to lay their eggs and all that. Anyway, it's just natural selection. I had a professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, say to me, well, Dr. Jackson, some of those beaks were seen to, they must have been little stumpy ones, seen to increase in length by 13 times longer in 20 years. I said, well, sir, do you really believe evolution
Okay, we're just gonna take a drink for. Do you really believe that? Because it is. It's
I'm not
never
even
a good
sure what
response.
that means. I'm not sure what it means by they're 13 times longer. Like, how does that?
I don't buy
How
that
would
this.
that
You know,
work?
we're also taking a drink for conversations that didn't happen, because I'm pretty sure this didn't happen as we're.
I don't know how. Like, that's massive for
That
a
would
bird
end.
of that size.
That would end up with a beak that's like bigger than the rest of the body of the bird. This is not
Yes.
Quetzalcoatlus here. We're like, yeah,
No,
maybe.
it's insane.
Yeah, this is birds.
Could work that fast. That in 20 years, mutation could combine with natural selection to do that. And he went, oh, well, no.
What?
That's evolution.
Yeah, this is definitely a thing that didn't happen. Just taking a drink again for it. Partially 'cause I'm thirsty. Also, because we're gonna want a break pretty soon.
Okay. Hold on a second. What was the point of that story?
There wasn't. It was just to show Charles Jackson's incredulity at a straw man version of evolution.
I thought he said, like, I thought he was bringing this up because, like, the professor would say, "Well, yeah, of course it was. What else could it have been?" But then he said, "Do you believe that?" And the professor said, "No." Like, then what does the professor think it was?
Okay, we got a $5 super chat from Carrie Bronson who says, my favorite creationist trope is, quote, it's just, brackets, describes evolution, close bracket, but it's not evolution because, open bracket, nonsense and or dishonesty, close bracket, close bracket. Yeah, it really is. It's like, it's just, here's evolution, exactly how evolution works. That's not evolution because of, insert reason that makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Yep. And also, then you go on and strawman what evolution actually is. Like, this thing that I'm describing, which is exactly what, scientists call evolution, that's not evolution. This other thing that no one believes in, that's evolution. No, it's not. And this comes to one of the things that I tell people a lot. Look, if you want to criticize an idea, you should be able to explain the idea to proponents of it to their satisfaction that is in fact what they believe. If you can't do that, you're not ready to criticize the idea. That doesn't make the idea right. It doesn't make you wrong to not believe it. But it does mean that you are not prepared to give an adequate critique of it. Which is fine, right? Just don't then think that you can, in fact, go give a critique. This is actually one of the things I fault Dawkins. His critique of religion is not a critique of actual religions. It's a critique of his weird straw man of religion, which isn't what really anyone actually believes who's religious. So when they look at his critiques, they're like, this is dumb. And they're right. It is.
Dapper. Religious people just believe in the Sky Daddy, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
That might be...
The Sky Daddy.
Please stop. Guys, this isn't r/atheism on this channel, just so you know.
I am joking when I say that. Like,
yes.
Big oof. Like, as much as I mean, I like Dawkins' biology work. I do not recommend anybody read his foray into philosophy.
Yeah, don't read The God Delusion. It's not worth it. If you want to read a book about atheism, there are much better options.
Yes. Yeah, good lord. Oh, man.
Go read someone who actually is a philosopher, who's an atheist, and who talks about atheism. That's what I would suggest if you want to read a book about the philosophy of atheism.
Graham Oppy.
Yep, Graham Oppy's a great example. Go read a Graham Oppy book. It'll be a lot harder to get through than The God Delusion, but it will also actually give you some solid philosophical grounding for atheism, which, maybe that's what you're after if you're trying to read a book about the philosophy of atheism. I don't know.
Yeah, it's if you want to learn about a subject, odds are you're probably going to go to the subject which has the best material or which has the best information on that,
Yeah.
So...
and the same thing is also true for theology, actually. Don't listen to these guys about theology. None of them are theologians. If you want to actually know about Christian theology, go talk to an actual Christian theologian. They exist. You can go find them. They're not hard to get to.
William Lane Craig, for instance.
Actually, he's an apologist, not a theologian. I actually wouldn't go to him for theology. They're actually... the people who you want to go to are people who have degrees from seminaries in things like systematic theology or things like that, who are writing books about theology for internal consumption by members of the religion of which they are a part. That's what you want.
It's supposed to take millions of years. I said, well, then this isn't evolution, isn't? is it? If it can happen in 20 years, just
What?
It's not evolution because it happened too fast, is your
I'm
argument?
taking a drink. So it's not that I don't believe you that beak size changed by, like, what was it, 1,300% or something in 20 years? That's not the comeback. Which it should be. It should be that didn't happen. I need a citation, right? Like, this is when you say citation needed there, Chuck. Because that's ridiculous. But instead you're just like, well, if evolution happens too fast, it's not evolution then. No. There's no... I mean, there are practical limits on about how fast evolution can proceed based on things like, like likely mutations, generation time, stuff like that. But there isn't like a theoretical, like, hard maximum or minimum for rate of morphological change.
If someone can change the oil in my car in less than an hour, then that means they didn't actually change the oil in my car. That's what
Basically,
that means.
that is it. It's like, oh, if this oil change is too fast, it doesn't count anymore, and I have to go get another one. What are you talking about? Like, there are actually good objections to a student who raised this actual supposed problem. Like, that didn't happen, and until you provide a citation, there's no reason for anyone to think that it did. But instead, you're just like, fast evolution is no evolution at all, which I guess is convenient for you as a young Earth creationist who thinks that hyper-evolution happened after the flood.
He's covering all his bases here, Dapper.
Seriously. All right, so here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to take a quick break. I will be back momentarily with a fresh drink, and we'll go back into Dr. Charles Jackson's presentation about why evolution isn't evolution. All right. Be back soon, everybody. Yeah, citation needed. See, that's what Charles Jackson should have said to this guy he was talking to. It's totally not because I keep forgetting to turn off the citation needed video. So, yeah, that's what's happening. Here we go. Welcome back, Jackson.
Yay.
All right. Got a fresh drink.
Natural selective breeding could do it. And then
It's a weird phrase. Like, I get what you mean by natural selective breeding. You just mean natural selection. But, like, it feels weird. Like, it's a portmanteau of natural selection and selective breeding.
Right.
Like, it's weird. Like, don't say it that way. Now, that's probably just a slip of the tongue. And to be fair, I make those too. So I'm usually not too harsh on creationists for doing the same thing, unless it's like something they should know and they repeatedly make the same mistake. Then, but yeah, don't say natural selective breeding. It's weird.
and the beaks all return to normal after the drought is over. This has been observed.
What's
What
normal?
does normal mean?
Let's take a drink.
What
There's no normal.
does that mean? So the thing about it is there's a range. There's like statistical variation within a range. That range decreases significantly during the dry season. It increases rather significantly during the wet season, so you can have overlap. Actually, there's a very interesting phenomenon that occurs called character displacement. Basically, if you have two finches and their beak sizes overlap and they are on the same island, individuals whose beak sizes do not overlap between these species will be selected for. If on one island you have, like, I don't know, Geospiza magnirostrus, on another island you have Geospiza conorostris, and so each one, so magnirostrus has a beak that's like, I don't know, I'm just making up numbers here. I don't know what the actual
It's
size is.
really
Like,
big,
let's say,
hence the name.
say it's 2 to 4 centimeters long. Let's just say the
Pretty big
conorostris
range.
has like 1 to 3 centimeters, right? So on their islands where they're alone, it may be 1 to 3 centimeters for conorostris and 2 to 4 for magnirostrus. But on the island where they co-occur, it's going to be, two. Let's say it's going to be 3 to 4, like, for magnirostrus, but then 1 to like 2.5 for conorostris. So they're not going to overlap.
This is some kind of
because-
niche partitioning nonsense.
Is who would have thunk it?
Yeah. Niche partitioning is cool. It's actually going to be a big topic in an upcoming video for my Thursday shows. My favorite example of niche partitioning is the difference between hawthorn maggots and apple maggots in North America, which share a common ancestor in, like, historical times, because, the apple is a European import.
Right.
And now two separate species evolved to alternately attack the ancestral hawthornberry host or the introduced apple host, and they don't interbreed anymore, and they are developing the apple wasps or flies, are developing specializations because they're dipterans, not hymenopterans. They're not wasps, they're flies.
One of the episodes of the creationist book that I'm reading actually posted a picture and said, how is it possible that, like, a sheep and a giraffe could live in the same environment?
Yeah. I don't know, because
I
they're
was like-
competing for the same food.
What the frick? What do you mean? How could they live in the same? Do giraffes live in the same environment as zebras because they occupy the same niche as a goat?
Right?
What?
Yeah, it's apparently niche partitioning, which, in case you guys don't know, the basics of niche partitioning is, so you have two species in an environment, and they share some resource that they both need, but they also have other resources that they can exploit that the other one not so great at. In this case, there's actually selection pressure for them to separate into specializing in different resources so that they don't actually come into competition. Because on the one hand, specializing for resource A and away from B is a bigger advantage than specializing towards the shared resource, right? So as time goes on, as new resources become available, new niches open up, what naturally happens is that organisms will radiate into the niches to avoid competition from other animals, which is why in any given environment, any given one niche is usually only occupied by one species, right? So, like, there aren't a whole lot of other super high browsers like the giraffe that are getting the top leaves. in the giraffe's environment. So, here we go.
By Peter and Rosemary Grant on the Galapagos Islands in their study, the beach of the beak of the finch. I was going to say the beach of the fink. Anyway, the beak of the finch. Yeah, it's a spoonerism there. Back to the biology textbook. What did
summary of their research? Their actual research is documented in a variety of technical papers over the past 3 decades.
You think that Charles Jackson is going to read a technical paper?
No.
Look, I was about to say I don't think he's ever read a technical paper. That's probably not technically true. He probably has read, but I don't think he spends time doing it. I think the closest he comes is reading the Answers Research Journal with pretend peer review.
I'd honestly be surprised if he reads even that.
No,
really.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know most creationists don't read it, and you do too. We know that the vast majority of creationists are not going to either AIG or ICR, or CMI, or the DI. They're not reading articles and books by these organizations. They're just not doing it.
Yeah.
Did it say, oh yeah, we got to understand this stuff because, also, they mentioned about Rosemary and Peter Grant.
Okay, hold on. So let's read this section before Charles Jackson gets into it. So the Grant's research, this is who we've been talking about, shows the effects of directional selection in nature, which, yes, it does. The Grant's data also show how competition and climate change affect natural selection. Yup. The work does have limitations. For example, while the Grants observed changes in the size of finches' beaks, they did not observe the formation of a new species. Okay, they've only been there for 30 years, man.
Also not true anymore.
Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a new species observed.
The big bird.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the species, the epithet is, but yes, they did observe formation of a new species.
Scientists predict that as new fossils are found, they will continue to expand our understanding of how species evolved. I mean, yeah. But also, I want to point out, look at this page. This is not from a technical journal. This is a page that has a section called Writing in Science with a little swooshy W. This is a textbook. I don't know why we're looking at a textbook. You should be looking at their papers, because I guarantee you that in their papers, they are also telling you what limitations their work has. But we're not seeing that. And also, the evolution of a new species is not the minimum for evolution. Right? Evolution happens both above and below the species. I don't. So, okay, let's see what Charles Jackson has to say about this completely in line with everything we understand about evolution description of the Grant's work.
It was their research on the Galapagos Island and the finches shows the effects of directional selection. The Grant's data also show how competition and climate change affect natural selection. The work does have limitations. For example, while the Grants observed changes in the size of the finches' beaks, they did not observe the formation of a new species. I'm sorry, I thought the theory was called, the frogs are back. Because they're trying to really freak me out here.
He's talking about the stuffed frogs earlier in the video. Don't worry about it.
At least they're not all looking at me. That's going to happen next, isn't it? Or they'll be over here next. And I'll start to think that I did lose a little oxygen on the plane.
Get to the point, Chuck.
Okay. They did not observe the formation of a new species. I thought the theory was the origin of species.
That's because you're an idiot who doesn't know the difference between a book title and the name of a scientific theory. I'm going to take a drink for Charles Jackson mixing up the title of the origin of species with the name of the theory and what the theory actually says, which is just crazy.
I mean, it's like, what?
Yeah, it's like
is there?
I don't even.
Does he
know.
think sexual selection is called the descent of man? Is that what he thinks?
Or maybe he thinks that the only thing occurring in the descent of man was sexual selection.
Maybe, who knows?
It's all just arbitrary hotness categories.
Yeah, I mean, good lord, what does?
Yeah,
what?
It might be the dumbest argument that I've heard in a long time to say evolution not true, because this particular group of scientists didn't observe one aspect of the theory of evolution that was the aspect that was named in the first book to propose natural selection. It's like, I mean, yeah, they didn't observe that up until that point. I don't
Their
get it.
work, the point of their work was to document natural selection in action. Right? Because one of the understandably justified counter arguments to natural selection in the late 1800s was that there were no observations of it in nature. No one had done like a rigorous study showing here's a mouse with a certain fur color that is new, and then this spread through the population due to some selective pressure. When Darwin laid out natural selection, it was sort of in some ways, sort of like a metaphysical framework for how to understand the evolutionary history of species, which is why there was an eclipse of Darwinism. But once genetics was figured out,
big drink for this whole crazy.
Absolutely, but once researchers figured out or rediscovered Mendelism, and once population genetics was like nailed down because we had an actual mathematical theory or set of theories how natural selection operates on mutations, and at that point it's like, yeah, okay, definitely natural selection is definitely like a major mechanism by which evolution proceeds. And then you have researchers who start gathering field data, like, oh, hey, we were observing this population, then something changed in the environment, or some new mutation arose, and now the population has shifted in some particular direction. The Grants were also doing that back in like the 70s or 80s. That's originally why they started doing that research. So they didn't go there to observe speciation, though that has happened by this point. But whatever.
Here we go.
And not just species, the origin of classes, of orders, of phyla, the origin of the phyla.
I'm sorry that 30 years of observing a group of tanagers didn't result in a new phylum, Chuck. I don't know why you would expect it.
Michael Behe said it should in Edge of Evolution.
I'm just taking
it. Actually said
I'm taking
we should expect a new phylum of Galapagos finches to have originated.
That is dumb. Okay, so here's the thing, right? First, the ranked taxa, like phylum, order, class, all that stuff, those ranks don't mean anything, right? Like, one phylum isn't the same kind of grouping as another phylum. However, it is basically true that the establishment of the various ranks in taxonomy basically happened earlier in time for each higher level of rank, right? So what the phyla were is basically what was evolving around the end of the Precambrian and the beginning of the Cambrian. And it's not because the Cambrian was some exceptional amount of crazy new hyper-evolution that we've never seen before. It's because that the small changes at the time, where we had organisms that were actually fairly closely related, but would become the ancestors of modern phyla, those small changes at that time ended up becoming what we now see as major differences between groups of organisms. And then as you go forward in time, you get the origin of various things like, subphyla and classes and orders, whatnot. That's just how it works. So you wouldn't expect to see a new phylum because the time for establishing new phyla is already gone. They're already in Chordata. They're never going to leave Chordata because you can't abandon your ancestry. Your ancestors will always be your ancestors. And the ancestors of all finches were chordates. They will always be chordates. So, I'm sorry that tanagers haven't rewound the clock of time to go back in time to establish a new super chordate phylum or something. I don't even know what it would mean for them to establish a new phylum. That doesn't even make sense. It's not how taxonomy works. It's not how evolution works. Oh my goodness. All right, here we go.
The origin of the subphyla, the origin of the kingdoms of living things, you see.
Yeah, those are all things that are farther back in time there, Chuck.
Way back.
They literally can't, new ones literally can't come up because any new organism will already be a member of all the previous clades, which will include kingdoms and phyla and subphyla. Take a drink.
And there's a whole debate now about, or there has been in recent years, because Dapper's least favorite word turned out to not be one kingdom, but like 30.
Oh, is it protist?
Yeah.
Yeah, protist is not a real thing.
And so, like, what does it mean? What does it even mean for something to be a kingdom? You have guys like Thomas Cavalier Smith, who are like, aha, here's like 10 different kingdoms of SAR protists, and it's like, do we have to call them kingdoms? Can you just call them clades? Like, does it matter? Well, no, not really. They're not equivalent in like their taxonomic disparity or diversity, right? It's just a grouping. It's just a clade, a monophyletic clade. So anyway,
So Smitty says, we couldn't discover a new phylum. Yes, we could discover a new phylum, but a new one couldn't evolve at this point.
so the most recent phylum, if I am recalling correctly, is was it Limnignathia, which was like this teeny tiny invertebrate that pretty much nobody studies, nobody really cares about. They found him like in the sand, in like 2004, I think, something like that. Yes, you could discover new phyla, and almost certainly, if we do, it's going to be some tiny invertebrate.
Yeah.
It's not going to be something large, almost certainly. It's just going to be something like, oh, hey, this entire phylum is like millimeter-long animals that live on the mouth parts of like lobsters. That's going to be
this phylum
it's a
will
thing,
have...
actually. That's Cycliophora.
Yeah. The thing is that phylum will have diverged way back in like the Cambrian, because that's when phyla were diverging.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's going to be something small, and when they unveil it, people are going to be like, "Oh, okay, cool." No one's going to care except the zoologists. I promise.
It's true. Even then, maybe not.
Even most zoologists, yeah, just won't care.
It's like, oh, there's a new little wormy thing. Okay.
Cool.
I'm going to continue studying the thing I'm studying right now, which is not that.
Yeah.
Origins of all things, not just species. That definition of
Nope, evolution is not the origin of all things. We're taking a big old drink for that.
species has been so blurred and grayed now, it can apply to anything.
I mean,
we need to.
it
I want to go back 10 seconds and make sure that I get that whole thing. We pause a lot.
Okay.
Let's give them 10 full seconds.
The kingdoms of living things. You see, it's the origins of all things, not just species. That definition of species has been so blurred and grayed now, it can apply to anything.
No,
one of us.
That's
one of us.
So it's true and not true, right? So there are multiple species concepts because, organisms are complicated, and species are man-made categories. Nature doesn't really care about species. But at the same time, there are groups of organisms which every single species concept would say are different species, right? Like,
Yes.
there is no species concept that lets, like, say, Gallus gallus be the same species as Homo sapiens. Gallus gallus is the red jungle fowl.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And Homo sapiens is, of course, humans. Stupid Horror Energy for 5 US says, how dare you criticize this member of Mensa? That's true. Charles Jackson is a card-carrying member of Mensa, but so is Orphan Red, the Flat Earth adult actress. So, just going to put out there that Mensa also includes Flat Earthers. Nothing against adult actresses. That's fine. It's the Flat Earther part. That's where the question starts coming in.
Right. And to your point, Dapper, yeah, I think he's confusing, like, I feel like he was probably taught, the biological species concept, like, in school.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has heard more recently that there are other species concepts, and he's like, they're just all over the place now. They have no idea what's going on. Yeah.
So, it might be worth it to go a little bit into species concept, right? So most people are familiar with the biological species concept, where you have a group of organisms that can, or in some cases can and do, interbreed to produce fertile offspring, and that's a species. And that works great for a lot of, like, diploid, multicellular organisms, like most animals and plants, right? Works great for, even works pretty well for fungi, right? Okay. But extant fungi and plants and animals Okay, well, let's say you go back into the fossil record. How can you tell which Triceratops fossils could have had babies with which other Triceratops fossils? You can't. There's no way. So you come up with the morphospecies concept, where you say, okay, well, these animals look similar enough that they seem to be within the range of variability that we see in modern extant species using the biological species concept. So we'll probably say they're probably in the same species, and we'll group them together in that way. Okay, sure. And then you can extend it to extant non-sexually reproducing organisms like bacteria or some, single-celled eukaryotes, things like that, right? Where they don't actually tend to have sexual reproduction, or they do it rarely, something like that. Or even, some vertebrates. We have whiptail lizards all over the place where I live. They don't reproduce sexually. They're a completely asexual group of lizards. They don't have males. They just have, I think it's triploid females, produce fertile eggs. Or actually, no, I think they're still actually diploid. Because I think it's just parthenogenesis and the male line just went extinct. If I remember correctly. You'll want to double check me on that. Pointing at whiptail. Because I know that Procambarus virginalis, the asexual crayfish, that was triploid. But I don't think that's the case for whiptails. Doesn't matter.
They went from triploid to triploid, yeah.
Because most reptiles that can do parthenogenesis, which is reproduction without actually mating, are still diploid. Anyway, it's not important. It doesn't work for those groups. So then you use, again, like the morphospecies concept. But then you can get to things like chronospecies, where, what's this? Is it Thelochnus, the aquatic?
Thalassochnus, yeah.
Thalassochnus, yeah, the aquatic sloths. They're South American animals that lived off the coast, and they were aquatic sloths. And there are 3 species in the one genus Thalassochnus, which I don't remember what the species names are, but each one is actually the same group of organisms at different periods of time, and they become progressively more adapted to aquatic life. So we say, okay, these meet the definition of different morphospecies concepts because they occur at different times over a continuous stretch where we have a pretty fine gradient. We just put sort of fuzzy borders around different time zones to give them different species names. Same thing happens with ceratopsian species. Like Triceratops horridus and Triceratops prorsus are almost certainly chronospecies, right? And so you get all of these different species concepts because life is complicated, and yeah, species don't really exist. But like we said at the beginning, no one's going to confuse Crocodilus niloticus with Canis latrans, the Nile crocodile and the North American coyote. They're clearly not the same species. And yeah, it does get complicated. What about Canis latrans and Canis lupus and Canis aureus and, all the other Canis species, right? This is like the wolf, the jackal, the coyote. They can interbreed, they can have fertile offspring. They tend not to, but they can. The Vern would be asking an interesting question. Are there genus? Probably should say chronogenera.
Are there chronogenera?
So, not
like
kind
I
of?
figure
Like you could say Australopithecus and Homo are sort of chronogenera.
so. I would probably say you'd have to start looking at invertebrates for that. You have to look at clams or brachiopods or foraminifera, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because in those cases, yes, because the fossil record is so good for them.
Well, what about Australopithecus and Homo?
Sure, yeah. There's
some overlap, but for the most part, Australopithecus is older than Homo. And one probably evolved into the other.
Right. It's just typically when I go for chronospecies, and I tend to go for invertebrates because there are lots of really good charts where you can show okay, this is considered one species, and this is another, and this is another, and this is another, and you can just go straight up the column, and it's all right, which was created, which evolved. How do you know? Are all of these related to each other? They all share a common ancestor. And also, why are they preserved this way if there was a global flood? How do you explain that?
Well, that's a whole topic on its own, which we've actually gone over in some here. The fossil distribution just doesn't match any kind of prediction also from a flood. Anyway, let's get a little bit more Charles Jackson in, because at this pace, we're going to be doing this one video for the rest of the time.
It's ridiculous. And so now they'll say, look, speciation has occurred. And many creationists will say to me, well, we have to give in and say speciation has occurred.
I mean, it is sort of required by the AIG flood model, and you're like an employee of AIG, Chuck. So, yeah, you do kind of have to say that because, like, no one thinks that Elephas maximus and what am I thinking of? Loxodonta africana are the same species. That's the African and the Asian elephant. But you guys think that they were both represented as well as what is it? Mammuthus grandis? No, that's not it. What's the species name for the mammoth?
Oh, Primigenius.
Yeah. And Mammuthus primigenius, like, you guys think that all of those came from one pair of original elephantids, and no one is prepared to say that elephants, Asian elephants, African elephants, and woolly mammoths are in the same species. Like, I don't think anyone's prepared for that.
We have genomes for all of them. It's not feasible in any way, shape, or form.
I think I was just compared to PewDiePie in the chat. That is not a fair.
Gross.
Well, one, there's some gross there, but also I'm not nearly popular enough to be reasonably comparable. I should be, yes. Guys, here's the new goal. Share this video until I beat T-Story on sub count and view count. Get me to be the #1 channel on YouTube, guys. I believe in you. You'll each of you have to share this video probably like 4 or 5 million times. But you can get there.
Doable.
Yeah, totally doable.
Given how many sock accounts Standing for Truth has, that should be doable. You know?
I don't think I can count on whoever that is to share this video too many times.
No, not real speciation. Don't forget that the word species was invented by Carolus Linnaeus.
Oh my goodness, we're taking a drink for Carolus Linnaeus, who apparently is
First of all,
Corolus.
Carolus?
Corolus, yeah.
Carolus?
We're taking a drink and we're going to talk about the origin of the word
Is this
species.
product placement for Carolus?
Okay. So, Mr. Corolla, if you will, did not invent the word species. So, we have the word genus and the word species, right? So, this ultimately comes out of Greek, right? We have genus just means the same thing as like the English word kind, right? It's a grouping of similar things. How similar? It depends on the context, right? Like I can say, oh, hey, what kind of thing are you holding? And you're like, oh, it's a cup. And then I can say, well, how many kinds of cup do you own? And I can say, well, I have beer glasses, and I have tumblers, and I have juice glasses, and I have wine glasses, and I have mugs for like coffee or hot cocoa or tea, right? Those are kinds of those things. And you can say, okay, well, how many kinds of beer glasses do you have? I'm like, well, I have one that has a Guinness logo, and I have one that has a cool little Klingon logo that someone got me from my Amazon wish list, and I have one that's just a generic beer glass, and I have a beer mug that has the EVE Online logo, because I used to play EVE Online a lot, and I got a little bit of merchandise to help support the company or whatever. Like, and those are all true things, by the way. That does, in fact, describe my glassware pretty effectively. So, like, there's no particular, like, objective criteria as what counts as in a kind. It's context dependent, right? And then there's species, which says which particular instance within the genus or the kind is this, right? So if I say, oh, I have beer glasses, right? That's a kind of glass that I have. You can say, okay, well, which particular one are you using right now? And I can say, okay, well, the one I'm using right now is my Guinness beer glass. It doesn't have Guinness in it, but I'm using it. Because, spoiler alerts, you can actually put things other than Guinness in a Guinness glass. Like, no one will stop you. It's a fun fact out there. So, in the original, like in Greek, you can say, okay, what genera of glasses do you have? And you can say, well, I have like beer glasses and whatnot. And right now I'm using one of the beer glasses. I'm using a species of beer glass. And this also occurs in other things, right? Like rocks come in species and genera. They're not biological by any stretch because they're just rocks, right? And so Carolus Linnaeus takes this concept and he applies species to the smallest category that he's wanting to talk about in his what was the name of his book? I can't remember.
Oh, Systema Natura?
Naturalis. Systema Naturalis, right? That's the genitive there. For,
well, I guess, regardless. But
naturae? I think
it's
plural.
Systema Natura.
Natura?
Hold on, let's look it up.
Systematic nature?
Hold on. We are looking it up. Right now, Systema Naturae. Systema Naturae.
That's right. Yeah. I think that's the genitive plural. You know what? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time thinking about Latin declensions, guys. Sorry, I'm done with that.
But
Come to a different
also,
stream.
Linnaeus was a creationist.
He was. The thing is,
So it's weird that Charles Jackson's like
Those
species
guys
were made
made
up
it.
by Carolus. Like, but he would have agreed more with you than with us on most things. So.
Nathaniel Gray for $5 says, "I have to bounce for a while. Is there going to be an after show today with a couple, with a Mothra and a Ghidorah emoji? So we'll take a drink for that." So normally I do an after show on my my Patreon and member Discord server. Unfortunately for you guys, that is not going to be happening today because I do have a guest here, and so I'm going to be hanging out with my guest so as not to be a host. So, yeah, we're going to eat nacho. It's going to be pretty great. I don't know if you guys know I like nacho. We're going to do black bean nacho. Anyway, not important. So yeah, Carolus Linnaeus did not invent the word species. He applied a previously existing word that had existed in Latin through Greek to a scientific work. So we're going to continue on now that I've given a bit of an etymology lesson about genera, genus, and species. By the way, genus is also the word from which ultimately the word gender derives in both grammar and in terms of things like gender identity, which if you want to see more about, I have a live stream that I did earlier this month about the word sex, gender, and about pronouns and their etymologies and uses throughout history. So go check that out if you want to see a whole breakdown of that, because chances are you believe something that's wrong about one of those topics. So, there you go.
A God-fearing, Bible-believing Swedish botanist who invented the entire binomial naming system.
That's true. All of those characteristics of him and the fact that he invented binomial nomenclature are correct. So we'll take a drink.
Good job, Bad Jackson.
Yes.
Like Homo sapiens for us.
Yep, true. Take a drink.
Didelphinus virginiana for the
Weird pronunciation, but that's the opossum. If he says opossum, take a drink.
possum.
Yep, drink.
uh,
I mean, it's not the opossum, it's like the North American opossum, because there are other opossums that live in South America, but look, he's giving a speech in North America to a North American audience. It's fine.
Ratus for the Norwegian black rat. Some
Yeah, there you go. Take a drink for that.
of those scientific names are easy.
No Muscus domestica? Come on, man. The house rat or house mouse? Come on.
Canis
the-
familiaris.
No, well, I mean, that was a Linnaean binomial, but that is no longer a valid binomial. So, actually, interestingly enough, I learned something about binomial priority, which is that if a domesticated species had been given a name before the wild members of the same species had been given their name, then actually the wild organism's binomial takes precedence over the binomial of the domesticated species. And the domesticated species name becomes a subspecies designation within the binomial of the wild.
Does that mean that... Okay, so I've seen Felis catus for the house cat, but doesn't that mean Felis silvestris would take precedence then?
Technically, yeah. Technically,
Okay.
cats should be Felis silvestris domesticus. Yep. Look, I don't make up the rules. So
I sent you
Arthur Burnett said, did he say possum or opossum? I believe he said possum, and here's where we're going to get into a little bit of my linguistic philosophy here. It is probably more proper to say opossum because there is an animal called the possum, which is a distinct group of marsupials living in Australia. However, possum is a regional variation on opossum in large swaths of the United States, and as a descriptivist, I can't say that he's necessarily wrong because there are significant populations of native English speakers for whom the word possum does in fact mean the animal that he's describing when he talks about Didelphis virginiana. So, I know that there is the possum, which is a very different animal that lives in Australia, but in this context, it's not really wrong to call them the opossum.
I sent, if I remember correctly, I think I sent you an article that talked about how the asexual and sexual stages of like a particular species of fungus can have different names.
Yeah, you can get different
I
binomials.
was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen.
Look, guys, if you ever want to have a weird, heated argument, talk about the oddities of like the class, like taxonomic rules, and like what gets priority and what when you can and can't give a binomial, and like it's you can get deep into the
And
weeds.
Like some of these rules make pretty good sense. Like whatever was first is first, or is
Usually,
the one that's expressing. Like that's usually like that's fine. If it but then there's some stuff where it's like if it turns out someone said Dynodon or what is it? Was it Massospondylus? Whatever. Before Tyrannosaurus showed up.
Oh, you're thinking of Dynamosaurus imperiosus, the original name of Tyrannosaurus rex.
Yeah, the Dynodon, the Dynamosaurus, all that stuff. If it turned out that one of those actually showed up before Tyrannosaurus, it would not matter.
Yeah, so
the name's already embedded in everything, so it wouldn't matter.
This is actually a specific thing for Tyrannosaurus. We're going to talk about it right after I read this $5 super chat. So $5 from Caleb Sherstead. But we in it shall be remembered. We few, happy few, we band of those who know AIG is a bag of fallacies. We'll take a drink. Okay, so the general rule in taxonomy is the first name gets to be the name. And if you later rename something, and unbeknownst to you, or even knownst to you, that name was like another name was already given to that organism. Your name doesn't get to stick. However,
Manospondylus, not Massospondylus.
The original name of Tyrannosaurus rex was Dynamosaurus imperiosus, and this was actually a name given to it earlier. However, basically, literally everyone forgot that for decades, and no one referred to Tyrannosaurus as Dynamosaurus for decades. And then when it was brought to the attention of scientists, like, hey guys, Dynamosaurus imperiosus has priority. It should be Dynamosaurus. They actually wrote a new rule into the taxonomic code that said if an organism had been exclusively referred to by a single name for like a certain number of decades, it just happened to match the number of decades that Tyrannosaurus rex had been misidentified, then you get to use the new name. So
they made a rule for T-Rex.
They did.
That's it.
They made a special rule for T-Rex, but technically it now works for any organism. So if it turns out that, like, I don't know, maybe like I can't use any Linnaean because that obviously Linnaeus was the first one, but like if it turns out that say Didelphis virginiana was somehow previously named something else, like I don't know, Didelphis americana in an obscure work before Didelphis virginiana was ever described, it doesn't matter anymore. It's still Didelphis virginiana.
I'll give you another one. Richard Dawkins says in Greatest Show on Earth that instead of Australopithecus being Australopithecus, oh no, now I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Oh no.
Oh, crap, I forgot it.
Well, listen to some Bad Jackson while you think about it.
Well, the point is, I'm probably not going to remember. The point is, it's the same thing. Like, it turned, I think it was Hemianthropus or something like that. Like, it doesn't matter at this point, basically. If we find out that there's an Australopith fossil somewhere dated to, like, 1923 or something, and it's like, oh, it was actually Hemianthropus. Like, no, it's kind of too late at this point.
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
So, by the way, because just nobody asked, the proper plural for phallus is in fact phalli. Because it's so you're looking at a Latin nominative is phallus, plural nominative would be phalli, and English almost exclusively takes Latin words from the nominative. Because nominative is generally considered to be unmarked. But whatever. It's also the lexical form of words in Latin is for nouns the nominative singular. Anyway, here we go.
I don't know, Quercus alba for white oak trees. Canis familiaris, Canis lupus, which are probably
Albuquerque is named for. Fun fact.
There you go. Also, Canis familiaris not a valid taxonomy.
The same species. Canis familiaris is a dog. Canis lupus is a wolf.
The gray wolf specific.
How many ever heard of a wolf dog? Wolves and dogs can have puppies together, therefore they're the same species. When I was in college, we
Yeah, according to, well, first of all, they are the same species, like even by name now. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why the biological species concept also kind of falls apart, because you have, we'll take actual different species, right? Like coy wolves are a real thing. That's a coyote wolf hybrid. That's Canis latrans x lupus, right? Or Canis lupus x latrans, depending, doesn't matter. So why do we call Canis latrans and Canis lupus different species? Well, one, they tend not to interbreed. Canis lupus and Canis latrans are much more likely to have antagonistic interaction than they are to interbreed. Most interactions between these two species result in aggression from Canis lupus up to the point of fatality for the members of Canis latrans, right? Now, part of that is because Canis latrans is slimmer, shorter, overall more gracile compared to the more, burly Canis lupus. Also, Canis lupus tends to run in packs, whereas Canis latrans tends to be relatively solitary compared to Canis lupus. So they tend not to get along. However, in rare instances, yes, they can interbreed. But for the most part, they have distinct morphologies, and they tend to have different breeding. They tend not to interchange much DNA. So we tend to call them different species. Because again, species aren't real, and there's more than one species concept. And for $5, Gupdu3 says Linnaeus wasn't the very first one, because Carl, a clerk, named a bunch of spiders. Then Linnaeus used his name, Nitpick. Okay, well, actually, I am not familiar with Carl, a clerk.
There
Or Carl
were,
a clerk, probably.
There were a couple of brothers in like the 1500s who also had a sort of binomial nomenclature system. But like, we don't ascribe taxonomy to them because they didn't formalize it. The same reason that we don't ascribe like evolution to, I don't know, like Erasmus Darwin, because he didn't formalize it, right? It's the people who pull most concepts together and formalize them the best are the ones who tend to get remembered for things.
Yeah, it's also the one whose work ends up becoming the reason why we have a particular field or a particular group of knowledge, which is sort of like why is it that Christopher Columbus gets credit for discovering the Americas for Europeans and not, say, like, whatever Viking guy was the first one in North America? It's because
Leif Erikson.
Leif Erikson. Yeah. It's because Leif Erikson's knowledge of North America didn't have any lasting impact in European society. People forgot about it. That's literally why. And no, I'm not saying that Christopher Columbus was a great guy. And yes, I recognize that people were here before that. That's why I said discovered it for Europe, because before that, Europe didn't know, and then they did. Trying to head off that criticism at the past, because yes, I'm aware of all of these things. But the thing is, you can discover something that someone else has discovered if you're discovering it for yourself and a new group of people who don't already know about it, right? So Christopher Columbus did discover the Americas. He wasn't the first one to discover it. Many people had discovered it before him, but he's the one who did discover it for what we call the Old World. So there you go. Anyway, here we go.
We were taught that was the definition of species if they can breed together successfully.
Yes, look, Chuck, I'm sorry for you that your high school biology class didn't get into all the complexities of varying species concepts. I don't know what to tell you, man. They probably also didn't get into the complications of like the current model of the atom. They probably gave you like the orbital model because it's simple and easy to understand. They probably didn't give you like electron clouds and whatnot, quantum mechanics in high school. I don't know what to tell you, man. You dumbed down science for kids.
When Ernst Mayr proposed the biological species concept in 1942, it's not like it was the only one.
Yeah, there's that.
Like
too.
it was just a way of describing species.
It has the advantage of being reasonably reasonably measurable, right? Like we can at least draw some hard boundaries in species using that definition in some cases. Which, I mean, that's great. Carrie Bronson says, discovered so well that nobody else needed to discover it again. Yeah, that's actually a pretty reasonable way of putting it for the Christopher Columbus. He discovered America so well that no one ever bothered to discover it again, because then everyone knew about it from his discovery. That's fair. Yeah. Because, obviously the Native Americans were the first people to discover it, but that discovery didn't filter its way back to like Eurasia or Africa or Australia or Antarctica. But there were You know what I mean. Anyway, here we go. I don't want to keep talking about Christopher Columbus. I'm actually not a fan, surprising stuff, right? But whatever, we'll keep going.
And the Bible says kinds reproducing after their kinds.
Okay, but here's the thing. Like the English word kind or the Greek word genus or, well, the Latinized word from Greek is genus, or Hebrew mean, this is not a hard and fast definition, right? It's contextual. You can say, oh, what kind of animal is that? Oh, it's a bovine. Oh, what kind of bovine is it? Oh, it's a domesticated member of Bos taurus. Oh, which kind of Bos taurus is it? You can oh, it's a Holstein. Okay. At every single step, you can say the same word as long as you're speaking informally. It all works, right? What kind of animal? It's a bovid. What kind of bovid? Bovine. What kind of bovine? Bos taurus. What kind of Bos taurus? Holstein. Always works. Hebrew, surprise, surprise, being a human language also has a word that's just kind of generically kind, whose exact meaning depends on context. There's no reason to think that mean, which is meme yod dun, in case you're interested in Hebrew, I don't know. There's no reason to think this was some kind of technical definition.
Dogs, jackals.
Okay, so Canis lupus, or Canis lupus familiaris and Canis aureus do indeed have the ability to interbreed with fertile offspring. All members of genus Canis do, as far as I know.
Coyotes.
Canis trans, again, yeah, also interbreed.
Dingoes and wolves.
That's just Canis lupus familiaris again. Dingoes are what's called a land race of dogs. A land race is different from a breed in that it's a distinct group of animals that have particular morphological characteristics, but they were not intentionally bred to have them. They were the result of natural selection acting on a domesticated animal in a particular area. There are many other land races of dogs. Dingoes are a land race of dogs.
Wolves, and maybe even foxes, we're not sure, are all interfertile.
No,
foxes
Vulpes,
are not interfertile.
Yeah, Vulpes and
wolves.
Canis are not interfertile. Sorry, buddy.
That should be the same species.
Okay, sure. Why not? I'll lump all of Canis into one species. Sure. I can't technically say it's wrong, because technically species are basically made up, but yeah, it would be a stupid thing to do, and I'm taking it.
Yeah.
It's almost like the biological species concept is not the be-all and end-all of species concepts. And really, no one ever said it was.
Canis or something,
Yeah, we'll call it Canis. The priority doesn't exist.
That should be called the same species, but no, don't forget that National Geographic issue used the variation within dogs as proof of evolution.
Well, even according to your definition there, Chuck, the variation with dogs crosses species boundaries because we have all these non-interfertile genera, like Lechion pictus and Canis and Vulpes and what's the dole genus?
Oh, is that Deucocyon?
Something like that, yeah. These are all different genera of canid, or canines, not even canids, that can't interbreed. It's DHOL, by the way.
Yes, I know how to... Nope, it's... Oh. Huon alpinus.
Oh,
I was thinking of the Wara.
I
was thinking of the Wara. Just Deucocyon avis.
By the way, Kuon is just the same root as Scion, except replace the Y with a U because traditionally, for no good reason, upsilon in Greek is transliterated as a Y in Latin. But the historical pronunciation was closer to a U in English. So yeah. Fun little
Sad,
fact
they're
there.
endangered.
What is it endangered at this point?
Oof, but true.
Oh, okay, so Space Dragon says, what about the single-celled canines? Would they be the same species as dogs and wolves in this case? So, in case anyone doesn't know about this, there is a sexually transmitted cancer in Canis lupus. I think it can even spread to, I'm pretty sure it can spread to most other members of the Canis. And it is, in fact, derived from a cancer cell in a domesticated dog. And there was recently, I think, a SciShow episode about it. Which is why it's now in the consciousness of sort of like science YouTube. It's complicated with that, right? Technically, no, you don't get to put it in its own new phylum. You probably could put it in its own new species because it's no longer exchanging genetic material with other members of Canis lupus. You could probably even put it in its own genus, because those things are a little wishy-washy in terms of what they are.
I have issues. That would also mean, if you're doing that for those, that would also mean the same is true of the HeLa cells.
I'm okay with that.
I'm not really okay with that. But at the same time, all these categories are constructs anyways, so...
Yeah, like we said, biology doesn't really care.
Yeah.
That's proof of evolution. Yeah, and it isn't. If evolution wasn't true...
It is. Like, Darwin did a whole chapter explaining like how variation can be manipulated under selective pressure. Like, whoa, how crazy.
I know. All right, here we go.
That could still happen, and it would still happen. If evolution wasn't true, now I'm getting conflict from the two leaders here. When am I supposed to end?
In 35 minutes.
Oh, question and answer. Okay, I'll try and get through. As you can see, I've made my 3 points, so I'm wrapping up. All right, here we go.
Is this what he calls wrapping up?
I guess.
Feynman said, science is a long history of learning how not to what? Fool ourselves.
He's right.
I agree. Oh, Godzilla, take a drink. All right, guys, before we hear Charles Jackson's bad take on Richard Feynman, which I don't really want to hear, but we're going to anyway, in hopefully about a month. We're going to start wrapping up. So, Jackson, what's up on your channel that people should know about?
Let's see. I have a regular Thursday show. Since you and I are not doing PowerPoints anymore, I'm reading a creationist book from 1967. Did man get here by evolution or by creation? And as my host and co-host Peter likes to say, it has all the cutting-edge arguments in young Earth creationism.
It really does.
It really
that's
does.
The sad thing. It's like you can at least see like prototype levels of everything the creationists are saying now right in there. And in many cases, it's just the same argument, exactly the same argument, no updates or new data.
Yeah. I've made the point about how I learned about like genetic entropy from that book before I heard like Sanford talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same concept. It's just got a nicer wrapping on it nowadays.
By the way, Eric Hamian sends $10 US with no message. Thank you very much, Eric Hamian. Which you guys might think I'm over pronouncing the CH. That's how I was told to pronounce it. So don't come at me on that one.
Still working on the Ancestor's Tale series. The next is the Howler Monkey's Tale.
Nice.
It's fun. So we've left the apes. We are now into monkeys.
Well, apes are monkeys.
Who knows?
Jackson. Come on.
I mean, we've left Hominoidea, and we are now within the larger group of Anthropoidea.
Okay.
So specifically, we'll jump more to Platyrrhines.
Here's something fun, Jackson. You know what I was watching before I started set up this show? I was watching a little video called Darwin's Confidence Part.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been watching some classic Jackson Wheat content. Guys, go watch Jackson Wheat's channel. It's great.
Oh, well, I do like that video. Like, I've done so many videos on the Cambrian explosion, it's ridiculous. But when I wrote the script for Professor Dave's video on the Cambrian, the reason his video is as long as it is I never want to write Cambrian explosion arguments again. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of saying the same things over and over, so I just wrote a script that hits all the bases.
Yeah.
It ended up being like an hour and 20 minutes.
It's a good video, though.
I
would say go watch, Professor Dave Explains, but you're probably already watching him if you're here. Let's be honest.
That's probably true. Yeah, no, he does great stuff. But yeah, I was like, I never want to write this argument again. If anybody says anything to me about the Cambrian, I'm just gonna send this at them and be like, I wrote most of this. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this video.
Well, I just mentioned the, Darwin's Confidence Part 1 because I appreciate you coming on here because before I ever started a YouTube channel, Jackson, I was already a subscriber of yours. You might
I
not know
appreciate
that because I was not using the Dapper Dino YouTube channel at that time. But yeah, you're one of the
You and
creators.
Erica.
Yeah. So yeah, we
Erica
both
actually,
fans.
yeah, Erica actually emailed me. The very first interaction I had with her was she emailed me and was like, "Hey, I'm a big fan of your channel, blah blah blah," and I was like, "Do you want to come on and have a chat?" And she agreed, and then got her own channel. Now she's way more popular than me, which for good
Mhm.
reason. Her videos are stupendous. Absolutely, go watch her also if you guys.
Oh, by the way,
and so-
guys, I know this has been a question: the return of Eric with Erica. I don't know if you guys know, but Erica got married less than a week ago, so
Yeah.
she now has a Mr. Gibbon officially.
Mhm.
Because of course, Luke is taking her last name, which is Gibbon. Her name is Erica G. Gibbon.
I have to point out she was called Gutsick Gibbon at the Faithless Forum, not Erica Gutsick Gibbon.
Nice.
Like that's how they refer to her.
So she's a little busy recently. Oh, I forgot something. But I did message her recently, and we did talk about when she would like to start doing that back up again. And it looks like right now, July's probably out. But the second Tuesday in August is currently what it's looking like for the return of Eric with Erica. So we are planning on having the return of Eric with Erica because I love doing it. She likes doing it. It gives her an excuse to drink way too many White Claws. So, all right, we're going a little bit over, so I'm going to give a quick rundown of what's coming up next on my channel. Let's see. So today is the 28th. On the 30th, we're going to be premiering a brand new series about a pastor named Pete Greer who basically understands none of science. The reason I did this series is because I get a lot of what the professional and semi-professional creationists are saying, right? Like, oh, they're talking about genetic entropy and various flood models and things. But I'm also curious as to what, just the average guy who goes to a YEC church is getting in the pew when the topic comes up. So I took a relatively long sermon, although actually I think for this type of church, it's actually not that long. In case you guys don't know, sermon length varies wildly between different groups of Christians. It can go from over an hour long in the case of some Protestants to 10, 15 minutes in the case of some group of Catholics, or just skipped altogether because there are Christian denominations where the sermon is the least important part of the service. Anyway, this is a fairly long one, and it goes into a lot of stuff about arguing with biology, and it's really, really bad. And so it's going to be a 4-part series. I already have the supercut finished for it. It's I think the supercut, which cuts out most of my intros and outros, is 2 hours, 27 minutes, some number of seconds long. It's
Dapper the movie.
It's basically. So yeah, look forward to that. The first part is gonna involve puppies. So if you like puppies, come see that on the 30th. That will be at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Those are North American times. If you live outside of North America, I don't know, do math, guys. Sorry. There's only so many time zones I can keep in my brain at once. On the 2nd, I have no idea. We're gonna do something. I'll tell you that. We're gonna do something. Then on Tuesday the 5th, we'll be back for Kent with Bent. Kent with Bent, I don't know, 80 something. It's ridiculous. We're coming up to 100. We're gonna have to plan 100 episode special. Yeah. So that's as far ahead as I'm gonna look right now, guys. Thank you very much for all of your support, your views, your chats. Remember, if you like this video, do hit like on it. If you don't like it, tell me why not. If you disagree with me, tell me why, but also be prepared for me to ask you to come on the channel because I don't debate in the comments. But if you want to come on and have a discussion, you can even have a discussion with me and Jackson probably because me and Jackson love to talk to creationists on air in a peaceable, personable way. That we're really reasonably affable dudes, I think.
It's kind of hilarious that there are some creationists out there who we won't name who call us Team Dodgeball.
Yeah,
and we go out of our way to talk to creationists.
Constantly inviting creationists on, and they tend to refuse. I don't know why. It's weird. So, Bob Knob, you're hoping to get the 2023 schedule layout. Tell you what, you seem to be able to get my attention pretty easily after this stream ends. So just go do that, and I'll give you as much of a schedule as I possibly can. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna hit play on the end credits, which of course is gonna encourage you to go ahead and check out the Patreon. Please do. It does help a whole lot. But anyway, that's for the end credits, Dapper. So here's end credits, Dapper. Later, guys. Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Yapetus, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.